On 5 News, reports of women and children being shot on sight in Aleppo. Syrian forces are accused of killing 82 civilians. The UN describes the situation as a complete meltdown of humanity.
Civilians have paid a brutal price during this conflict, and we're filled with the deepest foreboding for those who remain in this last hellish corner of opposition-held eastern Aleppo.
Also, a drunk driver who killed an 11-year-old boy is jailed for 16 months. Harry Whitlam was hit by a tractor on a farm. His family says the law must be changed to allow for tougher sentences.
I've got a lifetime sentencing. I've got a lifetime sentencing myself, so 16 months for him is nothing.
Misery for hundreds of thousands of passengers as train drivers strike again. And whatever happened to Christmas cheer, the cost of living goes up. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Matt Barbett. We've seen so much of the devastation and desperation in the Syrian city of Aleppo. But in the past 24 hours, the situation appears to have become unbearable. Civilians have reportedly been shot on sight. As many as 100 unaccompanied children are trapped in a building under heavy attack. And people are sending heartbreaking messages saying they have given up hope. It's happening as President Assad's troops move closer to driving out opposition forces. While around the world, politicians offer only strong words and sympathy. Our chief correspondent, Tessa Chapman, reports.
Under siege no more. Escaping East Aleppo, these civilians are freezing, hungry, weak, but no longer caught between the barrel bombs and bullets. Because the battle is almost over, government tanks and troops rolled into their neighbourhood, pushing rebels out and into an ever-shrinking pocket of this obliterated city. Many civilians, some say up to 100,000, are still hemmed in with the last opposition fighters. Listen to what this teacher calls his final message.
Don't believe anymore in the United Nations. Don't believe anymore in the international community. We didn't want anything else but freedom. You know, this world doesn't like freedom, it seems.
For months, 7-year-old Bana Alabi has been tweeting with her mother. Yesterday she wrote, "My dad is injured now, I'm crying." 3 hours later, "This is my last moment to either live or die." Her city is witnessing, in the words of the UN, a meltdown of humanity.
Civilians have paid a brutal price during this conflict, and we're filled with the deepest foreboding for those who remain in this last hellish corner of opposition-held eastern Aleppo. While some reportedly managed to flee yesterday, some were reportedly caught and killed on the spot, and others were arrested.
The UN says 24 of those were women and children. 100 children are thought to be in a building currently under heavy fire. Doctors and volunteers begged for safe passage for those still trapped, fearful they might be detained or even executed. Meanwhile, in the Great Mosque in Aleppo's old city, soldiers removed the rebels' flag and raised the Syrian one instead. But this place is so deeply divided, peace isn't winning yet.
Tessa, another really appalling day for the people of Aleppo. We've seen so many. What is being done to help those people there?
The UN, even at this very late hour, is trying to secure safe passage for civilians out of that rapidly shrinking rebel-held area. There are real fears that if that doesn't happen, that atrocities will be committed. There's been an emergency debate in the House of Commons this afternoon in which the situation was likened to genocides in Srebrenica and Rwanda. Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, launched a scathing attack on President Assad. He said, even if this battle is won, it will not be the end of the war.
The victory will turn to ashes in his mouth, because even if he reimposes his rule over the rubble of that city, about 2/3 of Syria will remain outside his control. Millions of Syrians viscerally hostile to the rule of a tyrant who has the blood of hundreds of thousands on his hands.
Strong words from the Foreign Secretary. We've heard so many of those as well. What difference will they make?
Well, they're not promising anything more than pressure. The UN as well has been paralysed over Syria because of the veto exercised by Russia. Russia is the country that could organise safe passage out of Aleppo for those civilians, but it's looking very unlikely. In fact, the situation really is dire tonight.
Tessa, thanks a lot. The mother of a boy who was knocked down and killed by a tractor has called for a change in the law after its driver was jailed for less than 18 months. 11-year-old Harry Whitlam died on a farm near Leeds in 2013. Gary Green was more than twice the drink-drive limit, but Harry's mum says he got a shorter sentence because it happened on private land and not a public road. Peter Lane reports.
If Harry Whitlam had been killed by a drunk driver on the road, the sentence could have been up to 14 years. But he was hit by a tractor on private land, so his death came under health and safety law instead. It meant that tractor driver Gary Green, who had 2 previous drink-drive convictions and had consumed an estimated 13 pints the night before the accident, was only jailed for 16 months. Harry's mum wept in court and is calling for a law change so that all drink drivers face the same punishment on public or private land.
I've got a lifetime sentencing. I've got a lifetime of sentencing myself, so 16 months for him is nothing. We're determined to change the law. Definitely where drink driving is concerned, definitely. We need a change in the law.
Harry was hit by the reversing tractor in a closed-off area of Swithin's Farm near Leeds, where his mum worked. The court heard that when Gary Green was arrested, his eyes were glazed and he smelt strongly of alcohol. The judge said that when Gary Green got into the tractor here that day, the dangers were obvious, the risk was foreseeable, and that he showed a flagrant disregard for the law.
I have to work with the law that the Health and Safety Executive enforce. It's for the campaign that Mrs Whitlam is running, I believe, to try and get the law changed or refocused, but we have to work with the law that we have from Parliament.
Harry's mum says a law change would be his legacy. But it's important for you and him then to achieve something with this change in the law.
Yeah, that his name's used for some good, that his name's actually used for some good, you know, and then people look back and remember Harry Whitlam and the little boy who made a difference.
That difference, she hopes, will at the very least make people think twice before getting behind any wheel in any setting if they've been drinking. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Next, some breaking news we've been hearing the past few minutes. Some police investigating allegations of child abuse in football have given an update on the scale of their inquiry. Scotland Yard says it's received 106 separate allegations of historical sex abuse connected with individuals at 32 London football clubs. 4 of those clubs are in the Premier League and 2 are in the Championship. Around 300,000 passengers who've already endured weeks of turmoil at the hands of Southern Rail have been going through yet another day of disruption. Well, the row that's causing it all shows no sign of ending. Staff aren't working today, tomorrow or on Friday, in protest at plans for driver-only trains. Unions are blaming the government. The government says it's considering banning them from striking. Leila Hayes has the details.
Another morning of misery for Southern Rail commuters. This the first of 3 days of strikes, leaving many passengers going nowhere. Zoe Lamb is having to work from home. She normally commutes to London from Redhill in Surrey, a journey that should take 35 minutes, but often takes 2 hours, meaning she doesn't get to see her kids.
I always leave an extra hour to get into London for a half-an-hour journey because I don't know the train is going to arrive, I don't know the driver's going to arrive, and that uncertainty, that constant uncertainty, is what I would say is ruining our health.
At London's Victoria Station, there were no Southern trains at all.
More than 2,000 Southern services have been cancelled today, affecting around 300,000 passengers. They've been advised not to travel, but that's little comfort if you have no choice.
The strikes are over plans for driver-only trains. The government has accused the unions of militancy.
This is entirely politically motivated. There's no question about that. We've been trying to get the unions around the table for the last few days to sort out a deal that will end this. They just don't seem to want to come.
But the unions insist the strike is about safety.
Unfortunately, we are in the eye of the storm. A lot of people who pay vast amounts to travel on the railway will be inconvenienced. We're terribly sorry about that. But we have to do this for their good and for the good of my members.
What do you think can be done? What would you like to see change?
Other than bashing their heads together like I do with my kids, I'd just like it to get resolved.
Southern Rail passengers simply want an end to the disruption. But with more strikes planned, a solution seems very far away. Layla Hayes, 5 News.
Still to come on 5 News. An NHS shake-up into the way it investigates the deaths of patients.
We knew, and they knew, they'd made grave errors in my daughter's death.
Also, we look at what's behind the rise in the cost of living. And the Kanye West wing. Donald Trump gets a surprising celebrity visitor. More of that coming up after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. For anyone, the death of a loved one in hospital is hard enough to bear, especially if it could have been prevented. Well, a report on the NHS in England has found that too often lessons are just not being learned. It says families are often left in the dark during investigations, and it said the problem is especially bad when it comes to those patients with mental illnesses or learning disabilities. Our health correspondent Catherine Jones has more.
A young woman full of energy and vitality. But last year, while she was under the care of a mental health trust, Abby McAllister took her own life.
Had quite a lot of witnesses.
Yeah.
All her father and sister wanted to know was how it could have happened. Instead, they felt the NHS's investigation shut them out.
We knew, and they knew, they'd made grave errors in my daughter's death. We realised they were actually holding back all the time. They're not taking responsibility, for what actually happened.
Abby is dead. She died, so we know we can't take that back. But the whole process made it worse in the sense of being lied to.
In September, 5 News highlighted how the NHS squanders the chance to learn from coroner's reports into the deaths of people with learning disabilities or mental illness. Now, after a year-long inquiry, a national review has revealed the same flaw runs right through the system. There is no consistent method used to investigate a death. Each service does it differently. And too often, families and carers are not properly involved in the process, meaning opportunities to learn and to save lives in the future are constantly missed.
I was shocked by the scale of the problem across the NHS. I think there is no single trust that's doing everything right.
Secretary Jeremy Hunt.
Accepting the report's recommendations in full, the Health Secretary told MPs all NHS trusts in England will now have to publish details of deaths that could have been avoided.
The culture of the NHS is changing following a number of tragedies. But this report shows there is much progress to be made.
Jeremy Hunt commissioned this inquiry as a result of a relentless campaign by Sarah Ryan, whose son, Connor Sparrowhawk, died following serious failings at a unit for people with learning disabilities.
The Secretary of State says, I can assure you this will happen, that will happen, we'll do this by 2018 or 2019. And you just sort of think, well, A, why is it taking so long? B, why isn't it happening? And C, why are we all still sitting here talking about it?
Looks like it.
Zara and Calvin had to wait 9 months for an apology from the mental health trust that cared for Abby. Their hope is, in the future, families won't be faced with the defensiveness and secrecy that too often follows the death of a patient. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Now, it was an election that regularly focused on immigration, and some say it showed an ugly side of America. Since the start of the presidential campaign, images like this have become more and more commonplace, and reports of hate crimes have soared. As we test America's mood a month before Donald Trump becomes officially the president, Julian Drucker has found ordinary people left fearing for their safety.
Inside one of the country's largest mosques, the effects of America's divisive election are being felt. The state of Michigan used to see one hate crime reported to officials every month. But in the month since Donald Trump was elected, it's risen to 65. The city of Dearborn hasn't seen this many attacks since 9/11. So the imam here is offering advice to his congregation.
We are telling and informing the community to go together, to go out as a group rather than an individual. Make sure when your children go and speak to the principals, and make sure your children go into the school rather than being bullied outside or prevented from going to school, etc.
So life really has changed, hasn't it, in the last?
Surely, yes.
After the rise in hate crimes, the Department of Justice and the FBI have stressed they will prosecute the perpetrators. But many Muslims we've spoken to have urged the president-elect to do more to condemn them. We brought together 5 women who say they've all been targeted in recent weeks.
We are so scared, we are so threatened, and we don't know what the future is going to be.
We're constantly targeted. At our mosques, we have upped security. We have cops that we see. You wave to them before you walk in. You know, like it's the norm now.
Several times post-election, I've had people make verbal, assaults, calling me a terrorist, calling me a raghead, telling me to go back to where I came from. And one guy in particular actually chased me down the road.
Student coming in and going, "Oh, build the wall," as I walked by, and I just kind of looked back and glared at him, and he stopped because he recognized what he said was really foolish, but it was like, it didn't matter.
Donald Trump has been accused of enabling xenophobia and anti-Islamic sentiments in his rhetoric, but he has called for the wave of hate crimes to end.
Do you think he's doing enough to condemn it? I mean, he went on TV, didn't he, and said, "Stop it" to these people. Was that enough?
It was a joke. It was a joke. He needs to apologize to the whole world, not only Muslims. I survived 20 years of Saddam Hussein. I don't know how am I going to survive 4 years of Trump. It's scary.
I say that we can't live in fear. We have to fight. People have been fighting for this country since the beginning of time.
You kind of have to face the reality of the fact that he's going to be president, but it's like our job not to normalize it. Fine, he's going to be our president, but we're going to fight every single step of the way.
After a month of intimidation and violence, to make America harmonious again will be one of President Trump's first jobs.
Well, Julian's live in New York now at Donald Trump's famous headquarters, Trump Tower. And Julian, Donald Trump had another high-profile visitor there today. Who was that?
President-elect Trump is currently in there filling some of the biggest jobs in American politics. So we were surprised to see one of the biggest names in showbiz turn up. Kanye West dropped by in what appeared to be a social visit. So Mr. Trump said of the rapper, "He's a good man. We've been friends a long time." Kanye West joked that he was just here to get a picture. One wonders if he'll sing at the inauguration next month. Mr. Trump is apparently struggling to get big-name acts to perform there. In other business here, an oil baron will be America's next top diplomat. Rex Tillerson, chief exec of ExxonMobil. He has no public sector experience like Mr. Trump. What he does have is a close relationship with Vladimir Putin, which some Democrats here tonight are describing as dangerous and sad.
Julian, thanks very much indeed. Next, it's hardly what you want to hear in the run-up to Christmas, but the cost of living is rising at its fastest rate for 2 years. Last month, inflation was 1.2%, largely because of rises in the cost of fuel, clothes, booze and food. And as Dominic Reynolds reports now, that even includes your Christmas turkey.
The most wonderful time of the year is, for most of us, the most expensive time of the year too. How much more expensive than last year? Well, that's down to inflation. So what do today's numbers tell us about what this Christmas will cost us? Paul's about to do a year's worth of business in 3 days. He's going to deliver 44,000 turkeys, but fattening them up has been pricier since June, thanks to the wheat pound.
The price of feed, what we feed the turkey, the soya element of that has gone up enormously. British wheat is competitive in the world market, so that's more being exported.
What does that mean to the cost of a turkey from here?
Well, if you look at the feed costs, then our labour costs and other general inflation that's starting to come through, that we had to increase our prices by 3% this year.
Overall, food and drink costs this Christmas are up by 0.4%. Now, if you're driving home for Christmas, that tank of fuel won't be as cheap as it was. The oil price has risen in recent weeks and the pump price has too.
And when it's prices like this, you have to like top up, because tomorrow I can come back and it's like 120.
Oh yeah, last couple of years, yeah, it has been a bit of an increase, but what can you do? That's the way it goes, isn't it?
In the last month, petrol prices have gone up by 1.6 pence, while diesels increased by 2 pence. And as for the outfit for the Christmas party or the last-minute pair of socks you panic buy on Christmas Eve, both are likely to cost you a bit more this year. Clothing and shoe prices are up on average by 1.6%. What about when the decorations come down? Well, prices are set to keep on going up in 2017.
Enjoy Christmas while it lasts, because it's going to get more expensive. Inflation was never going to stay at near zero forever. It was always going to pick up to about 2%. The problem is it's rising a little bit above that. It's not the highest we've ever seen. It would be a bear hug rather than a vice-like grip.
But some forecasters say price inflation could hit 4% by next year. That means if your family has its Christmas traditions, watch out. Doing the same thing next time round could cost 4% more. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
Merry Christmas. Now, in around an hour's time, we'll have a 5 News special programme on the year that delivered President Trump. The biggest upset in living memory saw a man with no political experience taking on the biggest political job in the world. We'll look back at what happened and look ahead to what might happen next. That's Trump's triumphant year, a 5 News special coming up at 6:30. But that's it from me for now. Claire Nasir has the weather next. I'll see you again in an hour for that special. Bye-bye.